right, today I want to talk about something a little more serious than the last couple videos, and that is the topic of porn. There's an unexpected voice in this area, and I find it fascinating that Theo Vaughn has been talking about the dangers of porn quite a bit. If you go onto his channel, you'll see multiple videos in the last couple months on this topic. He is addressing it with a variety of different people. I'm going to bring up a bunch of different, I'm going to bring up about 3 different videos on this topic because the church has always spoken out against porn. But for the most part, I don't want to say everybody, but for the most part, the culture has kind of embraced it. But over the last couple years, you are seeing people within the culture beginning to question how good this is for us as human beings, the consumption of this. And that's what Theo Vaughn is doing, that I really want to commend him for. I love that this is taking place. So my name is Reverend T. I am the Unrefined Priest, and let's jump right into these videos, and I'll stop it and then I'll break it down, my thoughts on it and why I showed you this particular clip. So let's get into it.
Sex trafficking, when this began at the start of 2020. This is February 2020 when the fight to hold Pornhub accountable for rape, sex trafficking, child abuse began. And that was in the context of over a decade in the fight against trafficking at that point. And I had been paying attention to the headlines, obviously, when sexual abuse stories, trafficking stories came up. I was paying attention. And one of the stories that came up at late 2019 that really arrested my attention. It was a story of a 15-year-old girl, and she was from Broward County, Florida, and she was missing for an entire year, and she was finally found when her distraught mother was tipped off by a Pornhub user that he recognized her daughter on the site. Wow. And she was found in 58 videos being abused for profit. These are monetized videos. Police, were dispatched, and they actually rescued her out of his apartment. She had been impregnated. They got her out of that situation. But that was a story that had made some headlines, and it was a horrifying story. At the same time, there was an investigation that was released by the Sunday Times, the London Sunday Times, and they had found dozens of illegal videos on Pornhub within minutes, even children as young as 3. So these 2 particular stories were standing out. There was one other that was.
All right. The reason that I showed you that clip is because I think we're all aware that this sort of thing takes place in the porn industry. But for the most part, we generally think of it as these are abnormalities. These are not the normal thing that you're running into in porn. Yes, it exists, but it's not necessarily the norm. And this is the way that we have kind of justified the use of porn, even though we know that this is something that really truly does take place. So the reason that I'm bringing this up is because this is easy to dismiss. The human mind is incredible at dismissing what it wants to dismiss. Now, I'm not trying to minimize this at all. That is very serious and probably more prevalent than we even imagine. But it is something that we find a way to dismiss and get around and just kind of write off as something that is not part of the normal industry. But I did want to bring that up because Theo Vaughn is bringing this whole thing into the forefront, having guests on like her, which is incredible. Now, the next thing that I want to look at is I want to look at a video that Theo Vaughn did with Joe Rogan. And he's talking about his own personal use of porn, his own demons, and his own frustrations and struggles with it, and why he thinks that it's bad for him. Now, that's when you move it from the abstract to the big grand ideas of the first video that we looked at, to the more personal effect that it's having on you as an individual. So this is a fascinating conversation between Joe Rogan and Theo Von, and there is some crude talk in here, but I'm showing it to you because you really want to get the meat of what he is talking about. So let me get this one rolling for you.
I try to stay off of pornography, man. That's one of my biggest arch nemesis is pornography.
Why?
Because it just weakens me. Yeah.
How so?
I put all my sexual, my fantasies and stuff, they're not mine anymore. They live, somebody created them better than my imagination can. And so they live in these, on the internet in these boxes. And it's like, and if it's not mine, I think, then I don't value it as much or something. And so I think it like weakens my ability to like be able to have sex and like be comfortable in that sort of world. And
really?
Oh yeah.
Weakens your ability to be comfortable. Like how so?
Well, because I get used to watching the sex and seeing it and not having to like be engaged with my actual feelings or anything. So then I see it and I still get all the joys out of it. I'm still out there e-jacking and, spraying out natural. But I don't have any of the feelings attached to it. So then when I am engaging with somebody that I care about or something, it just doesn't calculate for me emotionally as well. And that's not maybe.
All right. There's a couple things in here that I think are really important to look at. The first thing that he talks about is when he's watching it, what he's trying to do is get in touch with his own fantasies, his own desires, his own passions. But what he's actually doing is trading those for what somebody else created. You heard him say that they're not mine anymore. They're something that somebody else created that's in this box, and I'm watching it, and it loses something for me because it's not mine anymore. But the big takeaway from this, I think, is at the end of that clip that I showed you. And that's when he starts talking about when he's watching porn. And I love that he refers to it as the sex. But when he's watching porn, he is not socially or intimately engaging in any aspect. And he gets so used to that sort of sex that there's no social engagement, that there's no intimacy in there, that when there are moments of real intimacy with the real person, you have to figure out how to re-engage and have that intimate part that is supposed to be part of sex that is missing in porn. And I think that that's a really interesting idea that probably a lot of people have not thought about. And that is that we are being desensitized by watching porn over and over and over again that is divorced or absent of any intimacy. And so when you're getting used to doing that over and over and over again, and then you're trying to engage with somebody on an intimate level, it becomes somewhat of a challenge. And porn is desensitizing us to the intimacy that we're supposed to have in those moments. And I think Theo Von just brought that out like amazingly. I love this conversation. I love the fact that Joe Rogan's like, why? Why are you having a hard time with it? And then Theo Von just lays it out. Here's why. And it all makes perfect sense. And you and I can relate to this. You and I can relate to what he is talking about. And I'm sure that Joe Rogan's sitting there like, wow, I didn't think about it from that angle. It's a really... it seems like a conversation on porn, but it's a really deep conversation that is bringing you into the depths of porn that we generally don't talk about or even think about. And so I love that he's doing that. Here is the third conversation that I wanted to bring up. Again, these are all videos that have taken place relatively recently on the topic of porn. And he is bringing in scientists. I can't remember his name, but he is well known, really interesting guy with some really great insight. So this is, it's right there, Andrew Huberman. This is the longest of the videos that I want to show you, but he has some amazing things to say here. So let me just play this.
The big things that I think is a huge problem that's about to happen in the world is pornography addiction. I believe it's humongous. I believe it's bigger than alcoholism. I believe it's like the wave of it that we're starting to see, like people really suffering from it. I think it's one of the reasons why there's a lot of divorce. What do you see like neuroscientifically about how people can start to manage that? And then even just what you just talked about dopamine, it's like, I think it's helping people realize with that it's like such a hole that you're getting into. Whatever that thing is called, no pun intended. How can people start to cut that off for themselves? Is there anything they can do, manage, like, or do they have to get help if they believe that they're suffering from like pornography or sexual addiction?
Yeah. Super important questions. I'm so glad you're raising this because, it's interesting. If you look at the research on pornography and sexual behavior generally, right, what you'll find mostly in the academic studies of those areas is kind of an attempt to normalize a lot of behavior. There are reasons for that, some pseudo-political, some just kind of the way those studies were done for a long time. But it's really important to emphasize that it takes a while for science to catch up to culture.
Okay, it takes a while for science to catch up to culture.
Yeah, and the reason is not because scientists are lazy or they're uninterested, is that doing science well takes a long time. Look, I've run studies in my lab on animals, on humans, clinical trials. It takes a long time, like 3-4 years.
To get a really good study done. Meanwhile,
sometimes
to get real information
to get a really good study done. Meanwhile, life is happening.
All right.
In the last
The thing that he's bringing out here is that when you had the internet and this explosion of access to porn, now porn has always been out there. I'm a child of the 90s. I remember trying to track down porn when I was a kid, and trust me, it was hard. It wasn't just all out there for you. You had to work to get this stuff, and you got these like VHS tapes or magazines, and that was all that you had, but it was a lot of work. And now you've got porn right at your fingertips anytime you want it. It's on your phone. And what Andrew Huberman's bringing up here is that when this took place, generally the culture just kind of took it in. Look at the benefits. This is kind of amazing, the access that we have. But there's a scientific community behind all this that is trying to figure out what are the ramifications of this? What are the potential pitfalls of having porn just available anytime to pretty much anybody? And what he's saying here is that it took a long time for science to actually do the research and have the information that it needed to address the issue of porn, because research takes years and years and years. And during those years, we're just continually pumping out more and more porn. And now we're beginning to see the scientific conclusions of this access to porn, and it's not good. That what it is doing to us is actually destroying us. And it's particularly in kids. And I do wholly recommend this video to you because he breaks down the effect that porn has on young minds particularly, but just the effect that porn has on, you know, all of our minds. It is this dopamine hit that we're seeking, and the more that you do it, the bigger the more you keep searching for that bigger hit. And that's why you start out with, you know, pretty much relatively mundane porn, and, you know, months, years later, you've moved into very hardcore graphic porn, because what you're doing is you're trying to relive that dopamine hit that you had the first time. It works much the same way that alcohol or drugs or any of that sort of thing works, is that you're always chasing the next high, and that pushes you down a road of further perversion. And this was brought out in a couple other videos as well, is that in the porn industry, what they're trying to do is not necessarily pump out more porn, but different porn. Because it is that different porn that really draws people in, because they're looking for that hit. They're looking for something new, something crazy. And porn just keeps bringing you down a wild road. And things that you would never think that you would be watching a year and a half, 2 years from now, you're watching, because you're searching after that hit. The porn industry right now is just flooding the internet, and it is destroying our hearts and our minds. And I wanted to highlight what Theo Vaughn is doing, because I think it's of incredible importance. I think that these conversations matter immensely. We need to have more of these sorts of conversations, because people need to know what we're entering into. And make no mistake, we are in a whole new world as far as porn is go. The access, the graphic nature of it, all of it is being just heightened and pressed out there. So I wanted to bring these 3 videos up. I think they're amazing videos. I commend all 3 of them to you. Again, my name is Reverend T. I am the Unrefined Priest. If you like what we're doing, hit that subscribe button as well as that like button. It does help us out tremendously, and I will catch you on the next.